Snow fell softly over the sleepy town of Cedar Grove, blanketing the world in a quiet hush. Twinkling Christmas lights adorned every house, their warm glow reflecting off the icy streets. The aroma of cinnamon and baked cookies wafted from kitchens, mingling with the cheerful jingles playing from distant carolers. The town square was alive with the sights and sounds of the season, children laughing as they built snowmen, couples sipping hot cocoa from festive mugs, and vendors selling everything from hand-knit scarves to shiny ornaments. At the edge of the town, in a small, weathered house, 8-year-old Lily stared out her frosted window. She traced patterns on the glass with her finger, watching the bustling holiday world just beyond her reach. Inside her room, a tiny Christmas tree stood adorned with paper ornaments she'd made with her mom, Clara. It was modest but heartfelt, much like their life. This Christmas felt heavier than the ones before. Lily's father had passed away the previous spring, leaving her mother working long hours to make ends meet. Though they had each other, the absence of his booming laughter and warm presence left a void that no amount of holiday cheer could fill. Lily was a bright and imaginative child with a head full of dreams. She loved space, her bedroom walls decorated with stars and planets she'd painted herself. Her most prized possession was a tattered book about the universe her father had given her, sparking her dream of becoming an astronaut. Clara, her mother, was a kind and resilient woman who worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter. Though exhausted from juggling 2 jobs, she did her best to create a semblance of Christmas magic for Lily. Clara worried about how to afford even a few presents this year, but she hid her concerns behind a warm smile. As Lily sat by the window, clutching her favorite book, an idea came to her. She rushed to her desk, pulled out a sheet of paper, and began to write. Dear Santa. My name is Lily, and I'm 8 years old. I've been really good this year. I only want one thing for Christmas, to visit SpaceX. I love space, and it would be my biggest dream to see rockets and meet someone who works there. Thank you, Santa. Love, Lily. Lily carefully folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and wrote North Pole on the front. She didn't tell her mom, fearing she'd dismiss it as a silly idea. Instead, she slipped out to the town's red mailbox marked Letters to Santa the next morning, dropping her wish inside with a hopeful smile. Unbeknownst to Lily, her letter took a detour. One of the local postal workers, inspired by the heartfelt note, decided to share it on social media with a caption, "Sometimes, the simplest wishes are the most profound." The post quickly gained traction, catching the attention of none other than Elon Musk himself. Struck by Lily's passion for space, he made a snap decision: this Christmas, he would make her dream come true. On Christmas Eve, Clara received an unexpected call. A representative from SpaceX explained the situation, adding that Elon Musk himself wanted to deliver a special surprise to Lily. Overwhelmed with emotion, Clara could hardly believe her ears. She was sworn to secrecy to preserve the surprise. Lily awoke to the sound of soft knocking on their front door. Rubbing her eyes, she padded to the door in her pajamas. When she opened it, her jaw dropped. Standing on her snowy porch was Elon Musk, holding a large wrapped box and a warm smile. "Merry Christmas, Lily," he said. Clara appeared behind Lily, her face glowing with joy. Lily, too shocked to speak, watched as Elon knelt to her level. "I heard you love space," he began. "So, I thought we could give you a little taste of it." Inside the box was a full astronaut suit, complete with her name embroidered on it, and a golden ticket granting her and her mom an all-expenses-paid trip to SpaceX's headquarters. The ticket also included a tour of the facilities, a chance to watch a rocket launch, and a meet and greet with real astronauts. Tears filled Lily's eyes as she hugged Elon tightly. "Thank you. This is the best Christmas ever." The following weeks were a whirlwind for Lily and Clara. The trip to SpaceX was everything Lily had dreamed of and more. She marveled at the towering rockets, listened intently to the stories of astronauts, and even got to sit in a real spacecraft simulator. As they left the facility, Lily turned to her mom, her eyes alight with determination. "I'm going to work here one day," she said firmly. Clara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I know you will." Back in Cedar Grove, life returned to its usual rhythm, but for Lily, the stars felt a little closer, and her dreams a little brighter. All it took was one heartfelt letter and the kindness of strangers to make this Christmas unforgettable. And as snow fell once more over Cedar Grove, the spirit of the season reminded everyone that sometimes, miracles really do happen. Christmas Day dawned crisp and bright in Cedar Grove. Lily, still giddy from her incredible morning surprise, spent the hours after Elon Musk's visit trying on her astronaut suit and marveling at the golden ticket. Clara couldn't stop smiling as she watched her daughter's joy, a feeling of relief and gratitude replacing the weight she'd carried all year. But just as Lily was about to tuck her treasures safely away, the doorbell rang. Clara exchanged a curious glance with Lily and went to answer it. Standing on the porch was their neighbor, Mr. Grant, an elderly man known for his gruff demeanor and reluctance to socialize. He held a package in one hand and a frown on his weathered face. "Morning, Clara. Hope I'm not intruding," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Not at all, Mr. Grant. Merry Christmas," Clara replied, stepping aside to invite him in. Mr. Grant hesitated. "I came to drop this off," he said, extending the package. It was wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with string. "It's for Lily." Lily's eyes widened as she accepted the gift. "Thank you, Mr. Grant. What is it?" "Just something I've been holding on to for a while," he replied gruffly. But instead of leaving, he lingered. Clara noticed his furrowed brow and the slight tremble in his hand as he adjusted his cap. "Is everything all right, Mr. Grant?" she asked gently. He sighed deeply. "Truth is, I could use a bit of help. My son's family was supposed to come for Christmas, but they canceled last minute. Seems like every year, it gets lonelier." Clara's heart ached for the man who lived alone in the large house down the street. She'd always assumed he preferred his solitude, but now she saw the loneliness etched in his features. Lily, who was carefully unwrapping the gift, looked up with wide eyes. "Why don't you stay and have Christmas dinner with us?" she offered without hesitation. Clara smiled warmly. "We'd love to have you, Mr. Grant." He hesitated, but before he could reply, Lily's delighted gasp drew their attention. Inside the package was a beautifully preserved model rocket, clearly aged but lovingly maintained. "This is amazing!" Lily exclaimed. "Where did you get it?" "It belonged to my son when he was about your age," Mr. Grant said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "He loved space too. Thought you might give it a good home." Lily hugged the rocket carefully, as if it were the most precious gift she'd ever received. "Thank you. I'll treasure it." As the afternoon passed, Mr. Grant stayed for dinner, sharing stories about his son in his younger days. Lily was fascinated, and Clara felt a sense of warmth seeing her daughter's joy. But as the conversation deepened, an unexpected tension arose. Mr. Grant admitted he hadn't spoken to his son in years. "We had a falling out. Stubbornness runs in the family, I guess," he said with a bitter chuckle. "But it's too late to fix things now." "It's never too late," Clara said gently. "Christmas is about family and forgiveness." Mr. Grant shook his head. "You don't understand. I've tried, but he won't answer my calls. I sent him a letter last year, but no response." Lily, who had been listening intently, piped up. "Maybe you could send another letter. Like I did with Santa. You never know who's listening." Her innocent suggestion struck a chord in the room. Mr. Grant's expression softened, and a flicker of hope appeared in his eyes. The conversation stayed with Clara and Lily long after Mr. Grant left. His loneliness and estrangement from his son weighed heavily on them, reminding them of the fragility of family connections. For Lily, it was a lesson in the importance of reaching out, no matter how small the gesture. For Clara, it was a poignant reminder to cherish the moments she had with Lily, especially in the wake of their own loss. She resolved to help Mr. Grant in whatever way she could, embodying the true spirit of Christmas: love, compassion, and second chances. This quiet but profound event turned their holiday into something much more meaningful, hinting that the ultimate gift wasn't a golden ticket or a model rocket, but the connections we forge and the hearts we heal. The day after Christmas, Cedar Grove sparkled in the morning light. Icicles glistened like crystals on rooftops, and the snow-covered streets remained quiet, save for the crunch of footsteps. The festive decorations seemed to whisper promises of joy and renewal. Yet, for Clara and Lily, the warmth of the holiday was tempered by the conversation they'd shared with Mr. Grant the evening before. Seated at their modest kitchen table, Clara sipped her coffee, deep in thought. Lily, still in her pajamas, busied herself with her new astronaut suit and the model rocket Mr. Grant had gifted her. She studied the rocket closely, her fingers tracing its intricate details. "Mom," Lily said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Do you think Mr. Grant's son misses him, too?" Clara sighed. "I think it's possible. But sometimes, when people are hurt, they build walls. It can be hard to break through them." Lily frowned, her young mind wrestling with the complexity of relationships. He should try again. Maybe his son didn't get the letter he sent. Clara smiled at her daughter's hopeful spirit. "You're right, sweetheart. But it's not always that simple for grown-ups." Determined to help, Lily declared, "Then we'll make it simple. We can deliver a letter for him." That afternoon, Clara and Lily bundled up and walked to Mr. Grant's house, the snow crunching beneath their boots. His home, large but weather-worn, stood in stark contrast to the cheerful decorations adorning neighboring houses. Clara hesitated before knocking, unsure if they were overstepping, but Lily's enthusiasm spurred her forward. Mr. Grant answered the door, looking surprised but not displeased to see them. "Clara, Lily. What brings you here?" Lily wasted no time. "We're here to help you write a letter to your son." Mr. Grant's expression shifted from surprise to discomfort. "That's kind of you, but I've tried before." "He won't answer." "Maybe he didn't see it," Lily said earnestly. "You can try again, and this time, we'll make sure it gets to him." Clara chimed in, her voice gentle. "Sometimes it's not about the outcome, but about showing that you care enough to reach out again. Maybe this letter will be different." Mr. Grant hesitated, his gaze dropping to the floor. The vulnerability in his posture was palpable. Finally, he nodded. "All right. But I don't know what to say." The three of them sat around Mr. Grant's worn dining table. He struggled to find the words, each attempt filled with pauses and self-doubt. "What if he's still angry?" Mr. Grant muttered. "What if this just makes things worse?" Lily placed her small hand on his. "But what if it makes things better?" Her simple wisdom brought a soft chuckle from him, and he nodded. Together, they crafted a heartfelt letter, apologizing for past mistakes and expressing a longing to reconnect. Clara suggested including an old photo of the two of them to stir memories of happier times. The letter complete, Lily offered to deliver it to the post office. But Mr. Grant frowned. "I don't even know if he's at the same address anymore. It's been years." The realization hit Clara like a cold gust of wind. Without a valid address, the letter might never reach its intended recipient. Clara resolved to help, promising to use her contacts in town to track down Mr. Grant's son. The next few days were a flurry of efforts. Clara reached out to neighbors and acquaintances, hoping someone might have a lead. Meanwhile, Mr. Grant oscillated between hope and fear, questioning whether reopening old wounds was worth it. Clara faced her own doubts. Was she giving Mr. Grant false hope? The festive season had always been a time for miracles, but life had taught her not to expect them. Still, she pressed on, fueled by Lily's unwavering belief that kindness could mend even the deepest rifts. As days passed without success, tension mounted. Mr. Grant grew quieter, retreating into himself. "It's no use," he said one evening, his voice heavy with resignation. "I've waited too long." Lily refused to give up. "You can't stop now, Mr. Grant. Santa didn't give up on me. Maybe your son is waiting for this letter." Her words, spoken with childlike conviction, stirred something in him. He agreed to try one more time. A breakthrough came when Clara received a call from a neighbor who had once been friends with Mr. Grant's son. She provided a possible address, though she wasn't sure if it was current. It was a fragile lead, but it was enough to reignite their determination. Clara, Lily, and Mr. Grant drove to the nearest courier service to ensure the letter would be delivered quickly. As they handed the envelope to the clerk, a mixture of hope and fear filled the air. That evening, the family gathered in Clara and Lily's home, the twinkling Christmas lights casting a warm glow. Mr. Grant stared into his mug of cocoa, his hands trembling slightly. "I suppose all I can do now is wait," he said softly. The festive decorations around them felt both comforting and ironic, a backdrop of cheer against their anxious hearts. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily to the ground, and the distant sound of carolers filled the air. It was a stark reminder that Christmas was as much about hope in the face of uncertainty as it was about celebration. In the quiet moments that followed, Clara spoke gently. "You did something brave, Mr. Grant. That's what the season is about, taking a chance, even when it feels impossible." Lily nodded eagerly. "And remember, Christmas isn't over yet. Anything can happen." Though the letter was sent, the journey to healing was far from over. For Mr. Grant, it was a lesson in vulnerability; for Clara, a reminder of the strength found in community; and for Lily, a testament to the power of never giving up. 3 days after the letter had been sent, the holiday festivities in Cedar Grove began to wind down. The lights on the houses still twinkled, but the bustling energy of Christmas Eve had given way to a peaceful calm. Snow blanketed the streets in a soft, glistening layer, muffling the world in serene quiet. Inside Clara and Lily's cozy home, Mr. Grant sat near the fireplace, staring into the crackling flames. The warmth of the room contrasted with the unease in his heart. Lily, perched on the floor in her astronaut suit, played with her model rocket, occasionally stealing glances at Mr. Grant. Clara prepared tea in the kitchen, the clinking of cups the only sound breaking the silence. It had been days since they sent the letter, and despite Lily's boundless optimism, doubt gnawed at Mr. Grant. Maybe it was too much to hope for, he muttered, almost to himself. Clara, carrying a tray of steaming mugs, placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes, hope is all we have," she said gently. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, the unexpected sound startling them all. Lily bolted to her feet, her eyes wide with excitement. "Maybe it's him," she exclaimed, rushing to the door. When she opened it, a man stood on the porch, his face partially obscured by the falling snow. He was tall, with streaks of gray in his dark hair and an expression caught somewhere between apprehension and relief. He carried a small box under one arm and clutched the letter they had sent in his other hand. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling. Mr. Grant stood frozen, his face pale. "Thomas," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Thomas stepped inside, shaking the snow from his coat. His eyes, filled with emotion, locked onto his father's. "I got your letter," he said, holding it up. "It surprised me." Mr. Grant's voice cracked as he spoke. "I didn't think you'd come. I wasn't sure if you'd even read it." Thomas nodded, his gaze softening. "I almost didn't. But something told me I should. And when I read it, I realized how much time we've wasted being apart." Clara and Lily stood back, giving the two men space, their hearts swelling at the scene unfolding before them. The warmth of the fire seemed to extend into the room, wrapping them all in a cocoon of emotion. Thomas continued, his voice steady but filled with regret. "I was angry for a long time, Dad. But after reading your letter, I realized I've been holding on to something that doesn't matter anymore. I miss you." Tears streamed down Mr. Grant's weathered face as he stepped forward and embraced his son. The years of distance, pain, and misunderstandings seemed to melt away in that moment. For the first time in what felt like forever, they were a family again. As they sat down together, Thomas placed the small box he'd been carrying on the table. "I brought something for you," he said, pushing it toward his father. Mr. Grant opened the box with trembling hands, revealing an old, worn baseball glove. He let out a soft laugh, his voice thick with emotion. "This was yours when you were a boy," he said. Thomas smiled. "I found it while going through some things. I thought it was lost, but I kept it all these years. It reminded me of the good times we had, before things got complicated." Mr. Grant cradled the glove as if it were made of glass, a symbol of the bond they were beginning to rebuild. Lily, her face lit with excitement, couldn't hold back any longer. "Does this mean you'll spend Christmas together now?" Thomas laughed, the sound light and unburdened. "I'd like that, if it's okay with you, Dad." Mr. Grant nodded quickly, his eyes still glistening. "It's more than okay. It's all I've wanted for a long time." The evening transformed into one of joy and laughter as Thomas shared stories of his own family and life. Clara and Lily joined in, their small home filled with warmth and connection. The festive decorations, which had seemed like a stark contrast to Mr. Grant's earlier despair, now felt perfectly aligned with the spirit of the evening. Later, as the snow continued to fall outside, Mr. Grant pulled Lily aside. "You were right, young lady," he said with a smile. "Sometimes, you just have to try again." Lily beamed. "See? I told you Santa listens to everyone." Clara watched the exchange from across the room, her heart full. She had seen firsthand how an act of kindness, however small, could create ripples of change. As the evening wound down, Thomas stood to leave but promised to return with his wife and children the next day. "There's a lot to catch up on, Dad," he said, smiling warmly. Mr. Grant nodded, his expression one of gratitude and love. "I'm looking forward to it." After Thomas left, Mr. Grant turned to Clara and Lily. "I don't know how to thank you both," he said. "You gave me back something I thought I'd lost forever." Clara shook her head. "You did the hard part, Mr. Grant. You opened your heart." As they said their goodbyes that night, the Christmas lights outside seemed to shine a little brighter. It was a Christmas miracle, not just for Mr. Grant and Thomas, but for everyone who witnessed the power of forgiveness, love, and second chances. And as Lily gazed at the stars through her window that night, she whispered, "Thank you, Santa," knowing that sometimes, the greatest gifts couldn't be wrapped. The morning after Thomas and Mr. Grant's emotional reunion, Cedar Grove woke to a dazzling sunrise. Snow sparkled like diamonds, and a renewed sense of peace seemed to settle over the town. Inside Clara and Lily's warm home, the changes brought about by the events of the past days were tangible, reflected in the faces of the people who had shared this journey. Sitting by the window with a steaming cup of coffee, Mr. Grant seemed lighter, as if years of burdens had been lifted from his shoulders. His usual reserved demeanor had softened, replaced with a quiet gratitude that shone in his eyes. Clara joined him at the table, smiling warmly. "You look different this morning, Mr. Grant," she said. He chuckled softly. "I feel different. For years, I thought it was too late to make things right with my son. I let my pride and fear keep me from trying harder. But now," he paused, gazing out at the snowy streets. "Now I realize it's never too late, as long as you're willing to take the first step." Clara nodded. "That's a powerful thing to learn. And I'm glad you didn't let doubt win." Mr. Grant's voice grew thick with emotion. "I owe that to you and Lily. If you hadn't pushed me to write that letter, I might have missed my chance. Seeing Thomas again, it's a gift I didn't think I'd ever receive." He glanced over at Lily, who was playing with her model rocket nearby. That little girl of yours, she's got a big heart. She reminded me of the kind of hope I used to have." For Clara, witnessing Mr. Grant's transformation was deeply moving. In his reconciliation with Thomas, she saw echoes of her own challenges as a single mother, striving to create a loving home despite the absence of her late husband. Later that day, while Lily was busy building a snowman outside, Clara took a quiet moment to reflect. She realized how much strength and resilience she had gained over the years. Seeing Mr. Grant and Thomas reunite reminded her of the importance of holding on to hope, even when circumstances seemed bleak. She also felt a renewed sense of gratitude for her daughter. Lily's boundless optimism and willingness to help others had been the spark that led to a Christmas miracle. Clara resolved to nurture that spirit in her, knowing it was a gift to the world. Out in the yard, Lily worked diligently on her snowman, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She paused to look up at the sky, where the clouds parted just enough to let the sun shine through. Her mind wandered to the events of the past few days. She thought about the letter to Santa, the golden ticket, and the astronaut suit, gifts she had dreamed of for so long. But more than those material gifts, Lily felt something deeper. Helping Mr. Grant and witnessing the reunion with his son had taught her a valuable lesson. "Christmas isn't just about what you get," she murmured to herself. "It's about what you give, and how that can make people happy." As Clara stepped outside to join her, Lily turned to her mother with a bright smile. "Mom, do you think Santa helped Mr. Grant's son come back?" Clara knelt beside her daughter, brushing snow from her gloves. "Maybe he did. Or maybe it was you, with your big heart and belief in miracles." Lily's eyes sparkled. "I think everyone can be like Santa if they try to help others." Clara hugged her tightly, marveling at how her little girl was growing not just in age but in wisdom and compassion. Meanwhile, Thomas was back at his father's house, helping Mr. Grant dust off old photo albums and unpack decorations that hadn't been used in years. The act of decorating the home brought a sense of renewal, as if they were rebuilding not just a house, but a relationship. As Thomas hung a strand of lights along the mantel, he paused, looking at his father. "You know, Dad, I never stopped caring about you. I was just angry. But I see now that holding on to that anger wasn't helping anyone." Mr. Grant placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "And I should have been braver. I should have reached out sooner. I'm sorry for waiting so long, Thomas." Thomas smiled. "We're here now. That's what matters." By the time New Year's approached, it wasn't just Mr. Grant who had changed. Clara, Lily, and even the neighbors who had watched this story unfold felt the ripple effects of kindness and forgiveness. The Christmas lights strung across the houses seemed brighter, the bonds between people stronger. The events of this Christmas had reminded everyone that miracles didn't just come from gifts or grand gestures. Sometimes, they came from a simple letter, an open heart, and the courage to try again. And as Lily looked up at the stars that night, she whispered, "Thank you, Santa," knowing she had been part of something truly magical. As the glow of Christmas lingered in Cedar Grove, the story of Mr. Grant's reunion with his son began to ripple through the town, touching lives in unexpected ways. What had started as a small, personal miracle began to transform the people and the community, spreading the warmth of kindness and the holiday spirit far beyond the walls of Clara's and Mr. Grant's homes. News of the reconciliation spread quickly through the close-knit neighborhood. Neighbors who had long seen Mr. Grant as a reclusive, reserved man now saw him in a different light. On Christmas morning, he had walked to the town square with his son, smiling and greeting people for the first time in years. Mrs. Calloway, the owner of the bakery on Main Street, had been among the first to notice the change. She mentioned it to her customers, who passed the story along with their own reflections. "If Mr. Grant can reconcile with his son after all these years, maybe it's not too late for me to reach out to my brother," one customer said, clutching a box of Christmas cookies. The idea began to resonate. Throughout Cedar Grove, people started making amends, reconnecting with estranged family members and friends, and sending heartfelt messages they had been putting off. The story of Mr. Grant and Thomas became a reminder that forgiveness was possible, even when it seemed improbable. For Clara and Lily, the experience had reinforced their belief in the importance of small acts of kindness. Clara noticed a renewed energy in herself as she returned to her routine of work and raising Lily. The satisfaction of having helped Mr. Grant and his son reminded her of the power of community, and she began involving herself more in local events. At the town's New Year's Eve celebration, Clara spoke with other parents about organizing a toy drive for underprivileged children. "It doesn't take much to make a difference," she told them. "Even something as simple as helping a neighbor can change lives." Lily, too, embraced her role as a catalyst for change. She proudly shared the story of the letter to Santa with her friends at school, inspiring them to think about ways they could help others. Soon, her classmates began writing their own letters, not for gifts, but for ways to help their families, friends, or even strangers in need. One boy wrote to Santa asking for enough food to share with a family struggling on his street. Another girl asked for warm coats for her cousins who couldn't afford new ones. The spirit of generosity spread like wildfire, touching hearts far beyond Lily's small circle. Mr. Grant, who had often been seen as a gruff, solitary figure, found himself surrounded by newfound connections. Neighbors began stopping by to chat, bringing cookies or asking for advice on their gardens, a hobby he had pursued quietly for years. He surprised everyone, including himself, by welcoming them warmly. Through these interactions, he discovered that his story had resonated with others who were hesitant to take the first step toward repairing relationships. "If I can do it, so can you," he told a widower who had been estranged from his son for a decade. Thomas, too, found himself embraced by the community. As he spent more time in Cedar Grove, he became a bridge between his father and the younger residents. His children, visiting for New Year's, played in the snow with Lily and her friends, bringing a renewed sense of vitality to the neighborhood. The impact of the Christmas miracle extended beyond personal relationships. Inspired by the story, local businesses and organizations joined forces to spread holiday cheer. A group of shop owners organized a winter coat drive, while the school collected books and toys for families in need. The small acts of kindness multiplied, creating a wave of generosity that brightened the cold winter days. The town square, once a place of hurried errands, became a hub of connection as people paused to share stories, laughter, and plans for the future. As the year turned, Cedar Grove felt different, closer, warmer, and more united. The story of Mr. Grant and his son became a cherished tale, retold at gatherings and passed down as a reminder of the power of forgiveness and the importance of reaching out, no matter how much time had passed. For Lily, the greatest gift wasn't the golden ticket or the astronaut suit but knowing she had played a part in something bigger. Clara watched her daughter with pride, knowing that Lily's big heart would continue to inspire others. The small town of Cedar Grove had always been beautiful during the holidays, but now, it shone with a deeper glow, the light of a community transformed by kindness, hope, and the enduring magic of Christmas. The church bells of Cedar Grove rang out across the snowy streets, their melody carrying the promise of Christmas joy. Inside Mr. Grant's modest home, tension hung in the air as the family gathered for the first time in years. Thomas stood by the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the glowing Christmas lights strung along the street. His father sat in his armchair, nervously twisting his wedding ring. Clara and Lily sat quietly on the couch, sensing the delicate nature of the moment. This was it, their last chance to bridge the years of silence and hurt between father and son. "Thomas," Mr. Grant began, his voice trembling. "There's something I need to say." Thomas turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "I'm listening." Mr. Grant took a deep breath, the weight of years pressing on his chest. "I wasn't there when you needed me most. After your mother passed, I didn't know how to cope. Instead of being strong for you, I withdrew. I was afraid of failing you, so I didn't even try. And I'm sorry, son. More than I can ever say. The room fell silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire. Thomas's jaw tightened as he crossed the room, standing directly in front of his father. Do you know how long I waited to hear that? He said, his voice breaking. I thought you didn't care. I thought I wasn't enough to make you fight for us. Mr. Grant's eyes filled with tears. You were always enough. It was me who wasn't enough. But I want to make it right now, if you'll let me. The room seemed to hold its breath as Thomas stood there, the pain of years of estrangement etched on his face. Finally, he reached out and placed a hand on his father's shoulder. I've held on to that anger for too long, Dad. I don't want it anymore. I want us to start over. The two men embraced, their tears flowing freely as years of hurt melted away in a moment of profound reconciliation. Lily clapped her hands, her eyes shining. I knew Santa would help. Thomas turned to her with a smile. You're the one who helped, kiddo. Your letter made this happen. Lily beamed, her small face glowing with pride. Mr. Grant stepped back, his voice still thick with emotion. I think it's time we create some new memories. How about we light the Christmas tree together? Clara helped Thomas plug in the lights while Lily placed the star on top. When the tree lit up, casting a warm, golden glow across the room, it felt as though the light wasn't just illuminating the tree but their hearts as well. As they stood together, surrounded by the twinkling lights and the quiet magic of Christmas, the moment solidified the new beginning they had all hoped for, a testament to the power of forgiveness, love, and the enduring spirit of the holiday. As Christmas night settled over Cedar Grove, the town glimmered with festive lights and a renewed sense of unity. Snowflakes fell gently, blanketing the rooftops and streets in a soft, shimmering white. Inside Mr. Grant's home, the warmth of reconciliation lingered like the comforting glow of a hearth fire. The Christmas tree sparkled with ornaments, its lights reflecting in the joyful faces gathered around it. Clara and Lily sat on the floor, playing a board game with Thomas's children, their laughter echoing softly in the cozy room. Mr. Grant and Thomas stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold, their hearts full for the first time in years. It feels good to have everyone here, Mr. Grant said, his voice steady but brimming with emotion. Thomas nodded, smiling. It does. It feels right. Like this is how it was always meant to be. Mr. Grant reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. I want you to have this. It's the letter Lily helped me write to Santa. It's what started all this. Thomas opened the envelope and read the words, his chest tightening with emotion. You asked Santa to bring me back, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Grant's gaze met his son's. And he did. As the evening wore on, neighbors stopped by to deliver cookies and exchange warm wishes, drawn by the festive lights and the spirit of togetherness radiating from the Grant household. The once isolated home had become a beacon of hope and renewal for the community. Lily stood by the window, her gaze drifting to the starry sky. Clara joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Mom, Lily said softly, I think this was my best Christmas ever. Clara smiled. Mine too, sweetheart. Do you think Santa's still out there? Clara chuckled. I think Santa's magic is all around us, every time someone shows kindness, forgives, or helps someone in need. That's where the real magic is. Lily nodded thoughtfully, her young heart already carrying the wisdom of the lesson. As the family gathered one last time around the glowing tree, Mr. Grant raised his glass. To second chances, to forgiveness, and to the magic of Christmas that made it all possible. In that moment, surrounded by love and the promise of brighter days, the family knew they had been given the greatest gift of all, a fresh start and a renewed belief in the power of connection, kindness, and hope. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in quiet peace, as if Christmas itself were wrapping Cedar Grove in its timeless embrace.